Welcome to the Metapod podcast, the Pokemon podcast that revolves around the evolving meta. Crown Zenith is here, and so one of us opened some Crown Zenith. Who was it?
Who was it? Place your guess now. No. You can't
Sean
really
got
see
to
it.
open some Crown Zenith. What'd you get in there, Sean, for all our audio listeners?
Well, okay, so I'll tell people how much. I opened 2 ETBs.
Which is like, that's 20 packs, right?
Yeah.
I think the Crown Zenith were 10 packs each.
Yeah. That seems right. So 20 packs. I got 4 really good alternate arts, meaning like not the regular, but like the VV star type alternate arts. And they were, I got the Hisuian Zoro arc, which is kind of, it's really pretty, but it's really hard to read what's happening in the card. Look it up online. You'll see the art.
Hopefully you know what the card does, because good luck reading it.
Yeah, but the other 2 are very pretty. I'll start with the very pretty but less playable one, Simisear V-Star. Just the art on this is just
It's so goofy.
Look at that. Look at that goofy. Yeah, and then the really pretty playable card, Lumineon. That
Lumineon V.
Yeah, the Lumineon is gorgeous. So
absolutely pretty.
And then some of the other stuff I got the Radiant, Eternatus, and the Charizard.
Yeah, that's
cool.
huge, actually. Those are like arguably the 2 best cards out of Crown Zenith.
And then so there's both reverse hollow energy, and like a special energy that's textured. So this is the textured energy I got, which was a lightning. It's interesting. There's like a little lightning bolt and a Pokeball like in the texture that you were not going to be able to catch it on camera, but it was weird that there was 2 different types of hollow energy in the set.
I don't know. I just don't know how I feel about that, to be honest. I mean, I don't know. Secret, because that's essentially what you got, a secret rare energy, right?
Yeah.
I guess, as you were saying, I'm not going to see something in the camera, and people watching probably won't. You have to see it in person. But I feel like they just look like the regular reverse hollow energies. So it's like, man, bring back the gold, like the gold energy that was so cool. I mean, they've got these gold cards like the Giratina V-Star, Arceus Dalga, Palkia.
Yeah.
Just like bring those, man.
They really should have, because you're right. I opened this, and I opened a Fire Reverse, and like I could tell because I was feeling the card. But like if you just like play this or whatever, like the vast majority of people are not going to notice.
Yeah. So it's not the bling. Like play the old Sun and Moon,
or give a silver border secret rare.
Or I'm holding out for the silver borders.
Jake, I think the next holiday set is going to have it, and it's going to be so good.
It's going to just be so nice, and I just can't wait for Sword and Shield base set. But, Sean.
And then the other characters.
The other characters.
Yeah.
Which ones did you get? I see Mareep in there, Bidoof,
Mareep, Lapras, and Diancie.
That Diancie one is gorgeous.
Crazy. It's crazy looking.
Beautiful.
Yeah, let me see if I
can that's like almost like phone background type beauty that you find.
Yeah.
It's such a good looking card. It is so well illustrated.
So yeah, I opened up some Crown Zenith. That's what I got. It was fun. I'm not trying to collect the whole set, so I'll stop there. But
it was just fun while it lasted. Yeah. You got your shiny Charizard, but that's all. Every collector's dream right there. But there were a lot of other things that happened this weekend in the Pokemon trading card game, including an actual IRL regionals, not Crown Zenith legal, but we will talk a bit about those results because there are some really, really cool decks from Liverpool that hosted the regionals that you may have watched this weekend on Limitless's Twitch channel. And then also we'll talk a little bit. There was a late night Crown Zenith event online that we'll talk about, and even after this podcast airs, I think after this podcast airs, Sunny's Weekly happening tonight, Monday night, and then late night Tuesday is having another Crown Zenith event as well. So
interesting.
You can look at those. You can look at those results after this podcast has been posted, and you listened all the way through to see the results of that and things of that nature. But Sean, we can't break tradition.
No. We got that 5-star review, Jake.
we've got to do a review. This lovely listener left us a review to start the new year, too. This review was left on January 2nd, so starting the year off strong. Sean, this 5-star review is titled Cool Pod from DFOPL. I love this podcast, especially since I just came back into collecting and playing. It's good to listen for long flights like the 5-hour flight, and the McDonald's rallet is the keep up the good work, Sean. So, man, I remember, I'm a fake rallet fan. I never picked up the McDonald's rallet.
You could probably get it now for like 10 cents, right?
I could probably get it actually for really, really cheap. Yeah, I mean, McDonald's promos, unless they're like, yeah, I'm literally on TCG Player now. Aside from the like old McDonald's promos, the McDonald's promo for the rallet in 2022 is $1.03 market value.
Is that the foil?
Yeah, I believe so. Well, it actually doesn't say. The picture on TCG Player looks like it's hollow foil, near mint hollow foil. Yeah, nice. It's like a little over $1. So I will be buying that later after this stream, Sean. Okay. But thank you again, DFOPL, for the wonderful, wonderful review. If you want to leave a review for us to read on the podcast, let us know how we're doing. Good, bad, whatever. Make sure to leave the review or give us a rating or, leave us a nice old YouTube comment if you're a YouTube listener. That's a good review as well. But Sean, Liverpool regionals happened. It was great to watch as always. Limitless did an excellent job. They hosted the stream and whatnot. 761 players at Liverpool regionals. I feel like that's pretty good for a European event.
Yeah, for a UK event. I don't think it's like extreme. It's not a surprising one way or another, but it's certainly good. Like, because the US events are like, around 1,000 players, 1,100.
Yeah, I think it's just a little over 1,000.
So given it's in Europe, I think that's pretty good.
Yeah, I think it was great. From Sword and Shield to Silver Tempest, again, Crown Zenith won't be legal for like another 2 weeks or so. We'll see events and stuff about that later, but I think this event specifically, Liverpool, is really impactful, and there were some really, really cool decks that came out of this. But the winning deck, Sean, Leon Kesselring, hopefully I said that right, from Switzerland, won it with what they called Control Mew. Sean, Mew VMAX, it's kind of newest iteration, I would say. It's the typical, 4-3 line of Mew VMAX with the 4 Genesects. Still opting for Oricorio. There were several Mew lists that played Meloetta and the Alyssa Sparkle build that appeared a couple times I saw on the stream of Limitless at the Liverpool regionals, but this one being the DTE Mew VMAX version. Sean, what do you see in here that is interesting, in your opinion?
I was trying to figure out, what makes this control anything, right? And the answer, I think, is in just 8 cards. There's 8 cards, I think, maybe 10 if you count Path, that make this control move. You've got 4 Hand Disruption supporters. You've got 2 Judge, 1 Marnie, and 1 Roxanne. So 4 of the cards in your deck being Hand Disruption can be very annoying. Yeah. And then outside of that, your other cards, you've got 2 Lost Vacuum, which, it's it's I think both useful because if somebody else is playing a peak or some other stadium that you don't want, you can use that. But also it's just really annoying to get rid of tools or stadiums or whatever, right? Like get rid of your opponent's pieces forever. You've also got 2 Lost Cities. So this Lost City is a really interesting card because as we see more and more decks that are playing toolboxy kind of styles where there's only 1 or 2 copies of a card in a given deck, Lost City can be devastating for those decks. Like, obviously, if you Lost City away that Hoopa, then it can't hurt you ever again.
Mm-hmm.
But like, in Lost Box decks or any of these other like counter decks, you just lost City away a couple of key pieces, and that deck doesn't do much else.
I mean, we saw this a couple times on stream for Mew decks that play one or two Lost Cities. You know, the Drapion.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of decks that play Drapion that we saw play something like an Ordinary Rod on top of it. I believe the second place list that we'll talk about here in a second also plays Drapion Ordinary Rod. So with that, they're able to cycle through Drapions and just wipe out your Mews, because we've seen time and time again that Drapion just absolutely whacks Mew. You know, it's basically a free attack literally every single time that you can get it on the field. And so with Path to the Peak, 2 Path to the Peak, and 2 Lost Cities, you can shut off a lot of times at Drapions, not only for maybe turns that they could come in, but also, you know, responses before they get those Drapions back. There's also an Echoing Horn in this Mew VMAX list. Some Mews are opting back into the Echoing Horn. I know sometimes some play it and some don't play it. It just kind of depends on how your deck feels. If you've got an open slot left, I feel like that's probably the most flexible card in this list. Again, some people play it, some people don't. And they've got Collapsed Stadium in here, Sean.
Yeah, so like limiting, which is kind of weird in a Mew deck that you usually want a full bench of Genesects or whatever. But I guess like in the late game, maybe in certain situations, it's better to have that Collapse Stadium. Maybe, I'm not entirely sure. Like maybe it's against the Archeops, the Lugia Archeops matchup, or maybe if there was ever some thought there was a resurgence of Eternatus, like that's pretty good as a response.
I think it's also not only for, your opponent, like you're saying, deflecting your opponent, but I think it's also a little bit for you. Especially with, Genesect, you're going to want 3 Genesects down, right? Sometimes even 4 you get down. And so that last spot usually varies between like Mew VMAX and Oricorio. Sometimes I believe we saw this in one of the either semifinals or finals games, or sometime during day 2, there were Mew players that were playing like 2 Mew VMAXs on the field and 4 Genesects on the bench as well. So your bench is completely full. Remember, if you don't have a Mew V on the field, you can never copy Psychic Leap. And so this is interesting. This Collapse Stadium can be interesting. I don't know how often it happens, but you could put yourself in a situation to where if you're playing against a deck that has to 2-shot, 3-shot a Mew VMAX or something along those lines, and you don't have that Psychic Leap potential because you evolved for whatever reason, maybe you couldn't get rid of your final VMAX and the last one's in the prizes or something like that. And so your final VMAX in deck, instead of getting rid of it, discarding it off the Ultra Ball or whatever to draw more cards, you decided to go ahead and evolve. You can actually use that Collapse Stadium to put that Mew in the discard. And although, you kind of limit yourself a little bit on, not only losing out on a little bit of drop, but that Mew just going in the discard, right? You can't get that back. At least it's not getting KO'd, right? It can't get sniped or anything like that. So it can go a little bit of both ways. I feel like more often than not, probably to hinder your opponent. But it's an interesting thing. We've kind of talked about before this 3 different stadium split, but this is 5 stadiums. I think this is probably the heaviest count of stadiums that we've talked about on the channel.
Yeah, it's a lot of stadiums. But I mean, look, it's all situational. I guess
it really is.
I guess with Mew, you're kind of sitting there like, I have plenty of draw. I don't have a lot of Pokemon that I need. Like, so there are, if you really want, some flex spots. And I guess that's where you throw the flex spots, is in the stadium counts.
It's really interesting too, in my opinion, that this deck also has so many different switching options. Yeah. So like Mew is a free retreater, but because your double turbo energy is so critical to go on Mew more often than not, you're playing 4 cross switchers, you're playing a switch card, you're playing an escape rope. Like you're just switching and switching and switching. It feels like at times, because usually your cross switchers are going to work.
Yeah. I don't know. This is interesting. But other than that, I don't think there's really much more to this Mew VMAX. But, you know, I think it's still impressive just how long Mew VMAX has just been like, is still a top tier deck to get first at Liverpool regionals more than a year after it came out.
Yeah, I mean it won the first regionals back over in Australia, and now I mean it's still winning today. It just keeps on moving. But you know what else keeps on moving, Sean?
What's that, Jake?
Stefan Ivanov getting second place over at the Liverpool regionals with a deck that not a lot of people thought was going to come up, or maybe the smart people knew that this was the play. Sean, this is Lost Box Comfy Hisuian Goodra V-Star.
It's so, like, I'm looking at this list and I'm like, going straight Goodra with no healing. Like,
no healing whatsoever. This deck is more preventive and I would say more control-y than, you know, typical Hisuian Goodra V-Stars that we've seen. So again, we've talked about this numerous times. The Comfey Flower Selecting Colress Experiment Lost Box engine is so good.
Yep.
And it's the same here. Especially with a Pokemon that has multiple different energy types. You'll play those, you get your Mirage Gates online. You accelerate energy like crazy. You've got the Radiant Greninja in here as well. The Drapion V Ordinary Rod combo that I mentioned earlier, that is in here. That was a strategy that Stefan tried to utilize in the finals match along against Leon. But yeah, I mean, this deck, pretty cool. It's pretty crazy. I didn't think Hisuian Goodra V-Star was going to be in 2 top 8 places, mind you. Vinny, the 7th place finisher from Belgium, also was playing this deck a little bit different, but not super different. Pretty much the same concept as Stefan Ivanov. But Sean, what do you see in this list? What do you like?
Well, I mean, obviously you have the Goodras. You have a 3/3 line of Goodra and Goodra V-Star. You got one Cram, which is nice because it sets up the damage that you need with the Goodra V-Star. It's like you do 110, you do 200. That'll knock out almost any Pokemon that's relevant in the format right now.
Yeah.
And then you've got
a Zigzagoon in there as well for some extra pings.
Exactly.
With 4 scoop up nets because you're playing Comfeys. Anyways, continue. Sorry.
Yeah. No, you got the Drapion for that Mew matchup, which, like, you know, it's gonna go really fast. It's gonna hit really hard. So if you can get a free 3 prizes out of it, that's amazing. You know. And then, you know, you got the Radiant Greninja. So overall, like, the one thing, and the one other card that I'll say is probably a huge win for this deck is Temple of Sinnoh. The Temple of Sinnoh saying that all special energy on the field, yours and your opponents, are no longer have any effects and just provide 1 colorless energy. That disrupts so many decks right now, particularly Lugia and Mew VMAX. Like, can you imagine a Mew VMAX? You throw that Temple of Sinnoh down, if they don't have a way to get rid of it, and if they have to attach a second double turbo, and then that gets knocked out by your Drapion, like, they're down 2 double turbo just for 1 attacker. That's terrible.
It puts their odds very, very low.
Yeah. So
I will say also in here, Raihan is a really cool addition in this deck because you think about flower selecting, you know, for anybody who's played any sort of Lost Zone engine, the Colress flower selecting Comfey engine, as I call it. Sometimes you just don't get the cards in the Lost Zone fast enough. You don't, you know, maybe you don't find a lot of switching outs. Maybe you don't find your Colress turn 1 that you can do that. And so it's really hard a lot of times to get Mirage Gate active. And so with the Raihan, you know, getting those energy attachments becomes potentially a little bit easier if you've got those energies in the discard. And I mean, you've got Quick Balls, you've got the Greninja, you've got plenty of opportunities even manual retreating the Comfeys
Well,
to get an energy in the discard to power up your Hisui and Goodra.
I mean, also, Jake, think about it this way. It's a direct search for a Mirage Gate as a supporter.
Yeah. So you just accelerate like crazy.
Well, yeah, you don't even have to have an energy in hand. You could be like, oh, you knocked out my Comfey last turn? Okay, cool. Evolve into Goodra V-Star, Raihan, 1 energy onto it, grab the Mirage Gate, 2 more energy, we're ready to go. It's like
you can either do that or just find your V-Star.
Yeah, you could do that too. Like I like Raihan in this deck because that one of your Comfeys is probably getting knocked out. You're gonna give up just 1 prize to turn that Raihan on board. You have Luminion to go get the Raihan when you need it. It's cool. I like it.
For anyone who doesn't remember maybe what Hisui and Goodra V-Star does, because it's been a while, so it's not a card that we talk about every single week. This is a 270 HP dragon type Pokemon, has 1 attack, and the V-Star power is an ability. The attack, Rolling Iron, does 200 damage each time you use it. It costs water, metal, and colorless. So that's kind of what we were talking about, 3 energies.
Yep.
And the different ways to accelerate it in this deck and why it's so important. The attack, which is the most interesting, during your opponent's next turn, this Pokemon takes 80 less damage from attacks. And if that is a full HP Hisui and Goodra V-Star, they effectively, in order to one-shot you, have to do 350 damage, which...
Nobody's doing.
Yeah, no, I think maybe there's one Pokemon that kind of does that in this format, and it's Soul Rock Lunatone.
Yeah, well,
I think that's the only one that can actually hit it, and that's not even if they hit it, you're like, GG's, that was a really good move. So Hisui and Goodra can stall out a lot and really make your opponent struggle in trying to take KOs. But you may say, Jake, well, 80 less damage Mew if that hits you twice, right? What is it, 210 minus 80 is oh my gosh, well, that math is real weird. Well, anyways,
it's 130.
This Pokemon can't last forever, Hisui and Goodra V-Star. But with the V-Star power, that ability that I mentioned earlier is Moisture Star. During your turn, you may heal all damage from this Pokemon. So you can literally negate all the damage. And you said Mew VMAX is 130, right? After a Rolling Iron?
With no modifiers. It's 210 minus 80, right? So 130.
Yeah, and 130 times 2 is 260, which is 10 less than what this Goodra V-Star has. So you can negate all that and force 2 more turns out of the Mew VMAX. Now they've got all the different things, whatever, Choice Band, the candies, whatever. They've got different modifiers. We're just saying through that. And so with a lot of these Pokemon, their attacks get negated by the Moisture Star. And just Hisui and Goodra being just a wall, a really, really cool wall. So very, very cool list, in my opinion. I didn't know anybody talking about Hisui and Goodra V-Star, being the play, I feel like.
No, I mean, I think, it had some love several months ago, and then it kind of fell off. And the one thing I will say is we're coming up on, we're going to do a rotation podcast eventually. But it's a little early. I personally think we can give it another month or so. But if you want to know, hey, what cards should I go buy that are going to be really good after rotation? I think the Comfey Colress Experiment Mirage Gate engine. Because Colress Experiment goes from being a pretty good supporter to almost certainly being the best draw supporter in the format after. Well, I guess research is still around. Anyways, Colress Experiment's a great supporter.
It's gonna be better.
It's always gonna be better. But this whole concept of Comfey, Colress, Mirage Gate, as an engine, historically speaking, that kind of an engine that just lets you get 2 of any color energy, accelerate 2 on an item. It's just get them now. Get them now.
We've got another set to buffer, so it's not as expensive, until they reprint the card.
Yeah.
Colress Experiment and Comfey are probably going to be, and I mean, Comfey just got new art too, so theoretically the regular art is going to go down in price even. because I got that SAR in Crown Zenith, which is a gorgeous card, by the way. But Sean, what other deck could we talk about in this one?
Let's see here. In this one, I mean, Sander. You gotta look at Sander, Jake. I know what you're implying.
So again, there are three things guaranteed in life: death, taxes, and Sander Watchik making top 8 with a control deck at a event. I think he's now 3 for 3 in European events, making top 8 with control, each one a different one, I think.
So yeah, what am I looking at?
There's a lot of things in here. You've got your Cry of Destruction, Pokemon Celebrations, Yveltal, which if you do not remember, Yveltal, the basic Pokemon that has a double colorless attack that discards up to 3 special energy from your opponent's Pokemon. We've talked about with Temple of Sinnoh. You know, special energies dominate. They rock the format at this point, and so Yveltal is very, very strong. You've got a couple of other things in here as well. You have Regieleki, a card that maybe people don't think about a ton, but this one is in here not only because you're playing 3 speed energies on top of it, but because of its attacks. This 130 HP basic Pokemon Regieleki has a first attack for a colorless, just a single colorless. Put a trainer card from your discard pile into your hand. Pretty good, I would say. We've seen cards like that in the format before, and here it is again. It has a second attack as well, 2 lightning, 1 colorless. Discard 2 lightning energy from this Pokemon. This attack does 120 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. Could be good for getting rid of something specific. I don't know. There's a lot of Manaphy in the format, so you probably don't use that as much. But the option is still there because you play 3 speed lightning energies. But that's not the only lightning Pokemon you're playing, Sean, in this deck. There's a Flying Pikachu VMAX. A 1/1 line. Now, Flying Pikachu V and VMAX. We've actually seen Flying Pikachu VMAX before because of Azul Garcia Griego winning North American Internationals. We talked about that deck a while ago if you want to check that out. Completely different from this one. But there were some times that Azul had to just go in with Flying Pikachu and consistently use Max Balloon against a Pokemon like Miltank, right? Mm-hmm. And so this kind of has that same strategy of what Azul was doing. If you don't remember, Flying Pikachu VMAX, 310 HP Lightning VMAX Pokemon, has 1 singular attack for 160 damage. Lightning colorless is its cost. During your opponent's next turn, prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from basic Pokemon. Reggie? No, Reggie just donezo.
Oh, yeah.
Right. If you just have a lone Flying Pikachu VMAX and that is the only thing on the field, they literally can't touch you unless they're playing. Not even canceling Cologne works, actually.
I'm trying to think, like, the only decks that can get around this, like, well, not that can get around, like, it also, like, a lot of Lost Box decks.
Yep.
Can't do anything about this thing, right? Like, you're just sitting here like, well, crap.
If Lost Box isn't playing Sableye or they have trouble getting Sableye, right? They can't even put damage counters on this. And there's a big Parasol in here as well. So, you know, okay, maybe they do get the Sableye going. Well, big Parasol will shut that down instantly because it blocks all effects of attacks to all the Pokemon if that's in the active spot. So damage counter placement included. There's Radiant Greninja in here because with most, if all, not all control decks, you just want to churn through your deck at certain points, and so that helps you out. You got Manaphy to protect all your little bench Pokemon. You've got Miltank because that's a wall, you know, that just stops your opponent at times. You also have a Starly in here. It's been a while since we've talked about this card, Sean. But when you play Bird Keeper in the deck like Sander is, sometimes you can play this Starly. Starly has the ability Sky Circus. If you played Bird Keeper to keep your hand during this turn, ignore all energy in this Pokemon's attack cost. Well, Sean, what is Starly's attack?
I mean, it's Keen Eye. You search your deck for 2 cards and put them into your hand. That's literally, it's great.
It's a great attack, especially if you can play it for free, not having to commit energies. But if you do want to commit energies, because there are 4 double turbos in here, 3 twin energies, so you can theoretically still get this attack off. It costs 2 colorless, so it very manageable whether you use Bird Keeper or not to be able to use the Starly and grab as many things as you like. This has the typical Sander cards in here of Peonia and Sydney. For anyone who doesn't know, there's also some Colress Experiment in here. So, Sean, you were talking about just Colress being such an incredible draw supporter for decks. It is now apparent in Control as well. You've also got Thornton in here. Sean, remind me what Thornton does.
I mean, I can tell
you because we don't talk about it. Yeah.
I mean, Thornton does a couple of things, but I think for this deck, right? Like, Thornton lets you choose a basic Pokemon in your discard pile and switch it with one of your basic Pokemon in play. And then it retains all other aspects, right? Like, it's been in play, it has damage counters, energy, whatever. Now, I'm sure Sander has lots of reasons to use this, but for me, the main reason to use a card like this is to, in one turn, go from a Miltank, a Snorlax, or whatever, into that Flying Pikachu V that you have in your discard, and then you can Evo it on the same turn into the VMAX. So that, to me, like, that's huge. Like, imagine even you throw the Regieleki down, you attach your speed lightning energy to it, you get that draw. Cool. Next turn, Thornton onto the Regieleki, attach a double turbo energy, and in one turn, you've gone from not having any 2 Prizer on the field to having a Flying Pikachu VMAX on the field.
And I mean, it's just super strong. And not only that, I mean, you can do situations to where maybe earlier in the game you had that Gormandai Snorlax out, right? Because Gormandai Snorlax draws you a ton of cards. It's a great card. And maybe they gust around and stuff, and you can't get that Snorlax off the field, and you're kind of towards the end game. You can switch that Pokemon with, like you said, the Flying Pikachu potentially, or maybe even Eldegoss. There are multiple Eldegoss Vs in here. If you remember from past Sander control decks, there's a lot of game plans where
loop it.
Where you just want to loop. You Eldegoss V, attach a double turbo energy onto it, and you use float up, so you never deck out. And so that way, not only do you get rid of your Snorlax, because that's very tough to move at times, especially when you're playing one of the 3 Galar Mines in this list that even boost up the retreat cost to a whopping 5 on this Snorlax. You can get that guy off the field so your opponent can't bother you about it anymore, but then you also can go into your float up situation, and pretty cool, I will say, in this deck.
Yeah. Anyways, this deck, like, I think the win condition for this deck is obviously just getting your opponent to deck out. It like, I suppose there's a world in which Flying Pikachu VMAX takes all of the prizes, because it does do a crap load of damage. So.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume that when you're up against like Regigigas, right, and you've got your lone Pikachu VMAX in the active and you've got the energies on it, I mean, you have to attack in order to prevent Regigigas and the Reggie deck to hit you. So, I mean, you probably win that game either by them scooping or you taking 6 prizes, one of the two.
Yes, exactly. So, I think that's probably one of the few ways in which you win, by attacking. But outside of that, like, you're just going to deck your opponent out. So, yeah, I mean, if you've listened to this podcast any number of times, you know how much of a fan Jake especially is of Sander and Control. So,
it's just like it's a concept that not a lot of people play, and I think if you get good at it, you can get pretty good at the game, because you look at all the best players, they can all play Control,
True.
I'm forgetting his name. Grant
Manley,
Zul Garcia Griego, Danny Altavilla, well, any of those Dead Draw Gaming guys. You know, like all the best players at one point have probably played Control, and that I mean, it's just
also
it's great.
I think also though, like if you're ever planning to play in a big tournament in Europe, practice against Control because Sander's gonna be there. He's not gonna be
find out what he's going to play or something that he's played before, and try to figure out how to beat Float Up Eldegoss.
Jake, do you want to talk about? I think you sent me 3 other decks from Liverpool that were not necessarily in the top 8, but we could probably. Oh no, this is the regional breakdown. JK, we'll start with that.
Well, I mean, it's good. I think it's good to talk about what the day 2 metagame breakdown was. Lugia V-Star was the #1 deck, took 38% of the meta. In day 2, this is just day 2. I don't exactly know what day 1 was, but day 2 I think is pretty good because this is where all the top players were. You know, you got day 2 Lugia 38%, Mew VMAX 14%, Lost Box almost 13%, Regigigas with a little under 9%, and then you start going into other things like RC Stralodon, Vikavolt, Goodra.
Yeah, 2 of them.
And then a bunch of other different decks.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting here, like I think, you know, the last major tournament, Vikavolt did really well.
Yeah, I mean, it won.
Yeah, and then this one, it seems like there was maybe 3 Vikavolt decks in day 2, and I don't think any of them made the top 8. So
no, so just
who knows, man? Who knows anymore?
It's crazy. I mean, it's crazy how decks like that just appear, and they were just a really good play for that tournament, and then everybody starts playing the counter. You know, all the Lugias start playing Dunsparce and all those things. So it's crazy.
Jake, let's get to one of the lists that you wanted to talk about that's not in that top 8. What? I don't even. Snorlax Cherim, right?
Is literally just Snorlax Cherim. So you remember the unfaced fat Snorlax?
Yep.
In the Pokemon trading card game, not the Gormandized one, the unfaced fat has an attack for 3 energies, and the idea of this deck is for the Cherim. If you do not remember, Cherim accelerates grass energy to Pokemon, brings it over to the Snorlax, and I'm trying to find out
what that attack does.
It has Thumping Snore for 180 damage, 3 colorless energy. This Pokemon is now asleep. During Pokemon checkup, flip 2 coins instead of 1. If either of them is tails, this Pokemon is still asleep. So you don't necessarily always worry about the flipping thing, although I believe Joe Yates, when they played on stream, hit double heads an absurd amount of times in their 3-game series. But a lot of times, more often than not, your Snorlax is just going to get KO'd every turn because it's just 150 HP Pokemon. But there's a lot of good stuff in here. You got a Pyukumuku, one of our favorite cards, I feel like.
Yeah.
You've got the Cherims as well in there. You've got heavy duty research, trekking shoes in here. So a lot of draw power. Bird Keepers, Marnies, Serenas as well. You've got 3 copies of Serena. And remember, Serena not only is a good gust supporter, but also a pretty good draw supporter as well if you discard enough from your hand. You've also got switching carts in here. Your Radiant of choice is Greninja. Obviously got a Drapion because you got to be Mew, right? You're playing Twin Energies. You're playing Grass Energies. Choice Belts in here. This is just a really, really cool list. And I mean, it wasn't in the top 8. It was top 64 of Snoozy Boys, but is what the deck is being dubbed by Joe. But just an absolutely fun, really cool deck, and really cheap too.
I was gonna say, I'm trying to figure out, like, really, like, what's the premise of whatever the heck I'm looking at right now.
What do you mean the premise?
Well, like, I just think
you evolve to Cherim, you accelerate to Snorlax, and you attack.
No, I know how the deck operates mechanically, right? But like,
Yeah.
why would this be a deck that should win, right? Because I'm like,
I
okay,
mean, I don't
180,
I
but you
don't
go
know
to
if
sleep.
it's
I mean, to me, I'm just like, the whole point. Look, I'm trying to figure out. I think that it's really a value game, which
Mhm.
is almost all the cards in your deck are single prizers. Almost all the cards, like you have a whole engine that powers them up. They hit really hard. 180 damage is a lot. Ain't no
Yeah.
joke. And you throw a choice belt on there, and you're knocking out, regular
I mean,
Vs,
it's two-shotting everything.
or it's knocking out a regular V Pokemon
Yeah.
at 210. And then you have the Radiant Greninja, which I thought to myself, oh, maybe you set up like a big multi-prize attack. And I'm like, nope, there's no water energy in this deck, so that's not an option.
Literally just grass and twins.
Right. So I just think to myself, like, man, yes, I would not have come to this conclusion as this is the option, especially with like other single prize decks running around out there. Because like if it's another single prize deck that you're up against, I think you might have a hard time because then that value exchange don't work for prizes.
Well, I think a little bit probably has to do with, Joe probably really likes Cherrim.
Yeah, no, I'm
Right.
not saying
Wanted
play
to
what you
play
want.
Cherrim deck.
Play what you
But
want.
this deck also, I feel like, is ultra consistent.
That's
right?
true.
You're playing the heavy count of supporters, draw supporters. You're playing, the turbo shoes, the Pukumuku in there. You've got level balls and switch carts and things like that to be able to get your Pokemon. Clara as well to find Pokemon, a bunch of quick balls. I mean, and you've got, what is that? 4, 8, 10, 14 energies or something like that. Double digit energies for sure. Between the 4 twin energies and the however many grass energies there are. So I feel like this deck is pretty consistent. I feel like this is probably one of the more consistent versions
that
you can build.
That is a really interesting point of like, oh, why did this deck make top 64, which is really good.
Yeah.
Because like on paper, this deck, what? Why? And it might simply be that like, if I just never dead draw, then I got a chance in every game.
Yeah, like, I mean, there's some points where you just go faster than the Lugia V-Star and you knock out their only Lugia V on the field and they can't use the V-Star ability to bring out the Archeops and then accelerate their game plan. And so you just kind of steamroll. Like, that's just kind of how Pokemon is at some points in some matchups. And so, I mean, just really, really cool. And I know this is going to be all over local leagues. So hopefully we spread the propaganda of Cherrim Snorlax because, I mean, it's a really, really cool list.
All right, Jake. And then there was one other list from Liverpool Regional that you were like, we got to take a look at this guy. And this is from Alberto Conti. Got top 32.
Top 32 Turbo Mirage Gate. So a lot of Lost Box, toolbox decks that we've seen. They play the Comphase, they play the Colress Experiment, they play the Mirage Gates, yada, yada, yada. This deck is a little bit more aggressive than that. There are no Cramorants in this deck, Sean.
Yeah.
No little Cramorants to help you out when you can't necessarily get 7. This deck consistently getting 7 cards in the first turn, not only with the help of the VIP passes and the Comphase, the Greninja, Lumineon in this, your Colress Experiment, but you've got multiple copies of Pokestop, multiple copies of Lost Vacuum, and you've got multiple copies as well of the Forest Sealstone. Yeah. Usually you just see like 1 maybe, but this list playing 2 because they want to use it pretty much every single time. And they've got a Dragonite V in here as well, making a little bit of noise. And I'm trying to get the correct Dragonite V. I believe there's actually 2 different, there's 2 different kinds of Dragonite Vs. So I had to do a little bit of extra Googling. This one, Sean, has 2 attacks, has Shred, double colorless, 50 damage. This attack's damage isn't affected by any effects of your opponent's active Pokemon. But the second attack, Water, Lightning, Dragon Gale, 250 damage. Does 20 damage to each of your benched Pokemon. This is the big heavy hitter for when your opponent accidentally leaves a V in the active and you're going second, right?
Yeah, if you can get this attack off turn 1 going second, which, to your point, it's called Turbo Lost Box, Turbo Mirage Gate, and so like I've never seen 7 cards in the Lost Zone on turn 1 before, but maybe that is the point of those Forest Seal Stones. Is like,
yeah, I mean,
you have to find those pieces.
Yeah, it's to find, and what's really cool as well about this is, I believe Alberto was on one of the latter day 2 rounds on stream, and there was a cool play that he did where he used his own Lost Vacuum to take away his own Pokestop. He had used his Pokestop and then Lost Vacuumed it to get, what is it? Is that 2 cards in the Lost Zone?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
2 more cards right there. So you use one Comfy that puts 1 card in. You use Chorus Experiment that puts, 2 more cards in.
That's 3.
Right? You probably Comfy another time because you're playing 4 Scoop Up Nets, 4 Switch Carts, and 4 Escape Ropes. Right? Especially because you've got 4 quick balls, heavy ball, 4 VIP passes. Like, you're getting those Pokemon on the field, especially with that Pokestop there as well. You're finding your item cards. You're getting those Pokemon down. You're switching them out like crazy. I mean, getting 2 more off of that Lost Vacuum in there, it doesn't actually take a ton.
No, I was going to say what you could do is if you have that Forest Seal Stone too, you could throw it down, use the ability to grab the Lost Vacuum, then play the Lost Vacuum on the Forest Seal Stone you just played.
Yeah, you can do that as well. Yeah, it's really, really cool to see this. And I mean, I don't know if it's the best version, right?
It's cool though.
Of Lost Box, but it's really, I mean, it's high roll for sure, but it's really cool roll.
Yeah, I do like it.
You've got the finisher Kyogre in there as well. You know, Kyogre from Celebrations to discard 5 energies that you just used from the recycle energy system or whatever that card is called to put a bunch of energies back in and you just absolutely steamroll some Pokemon on the bench.
I will say a little surprising of all the... I feel like this deck, since it doesn't have Cramorant, there's no setup damage. Dragonite V does good damage, but I would almost like want to experiment with like 1 Drapion in here. Just for the Mew matchup. Like, because it's not like you're playing a one... Because without Cramorant, you are really not playing a 1 prize game. Because you've just got 2 Sableyes and a Kyogre, basically. Maybe the Greninja. But like for the most part, you're not winning on the prize trade in the same way that you are with like other versions of Lost Box. So I do think a Drapion, I don't know. I feel like I would like that in this list.
What do you take out of it though? Because I feel like this list is just so tight. Because you've got your Lumineon in there, right? Because you have to get Colress right away. You know, you got to put the Pokemon down on the bench. You got to switch them out a bajillion times.
I think it's a meta call of like how much you need Manaphy or not. Because like, you know, like we've seen some decks not play it. I mean, you've got Comfies. They're really, you know, so maybe that's a bad call. Maybe you just go down to 1 Forest Seal Stone. Like maybe, I don't know. Like it's definitely an awkward spot, but like that would be the spot where I'm like, I still would love to see a Drapion in here because Mew is still real good.
I think it's really cool as well to have Raikou V in.
Yep.
Raikou V, if you do not know, is just like the old Suicune V that we've talked about on this podcast, where Raikou V, Lightning Rondo, 20 plus for just a Lightning and colorless. So again, very easy, you know, Mirage Gate and things like that. This attack does 20 more damage for each benched Pokemon. You can knock up that math. Raikou probably a surprise to your opponent playing Lugia, right?
Yep.
There is, I mean, you just knock him out right away. It's a free, like it just, and you get to use Fleet-Footed, and you draw another card to help you get to that, you know, Wombo combo that you got. So just a really aggressive, really, really cool deck. There were so many cool decks in here, and with Crown Zenith as well just released. We've seen some tournaments, but at this point, there's not anything really in it that just really takes the cake. Sure, Radiant Eternatus is cool, but people are still trying to figure that card out. Seems like the strongest pair is at this point, Duraludon, VMAX, but, to be honest, you're better off just playing Arceus Duraludon, right? I feel like.
Yeah, it's...
At least at this point, and again, it's a fresh meta in terms of these new cards are fresh inside of it, so... Especially after, the Sunny Weekly on Monday night and then the late night on Tuesday night. We'll talk way more about those cards and those decks later in a future episode, Sean.
Indeed. But otherwise, pretty slow week.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad we had a regional because I don't know what we would have talked about for this long.
Oh my Lord. But yeah, some cool decks. Stick with us. And then Jake and I got to figure out what we want to talk about rotation in a few weeks.
Oh, yeah. When is rotation?
I want to say it's in March. I want to say rotation is, if they've announced it. I think they did.
I know they announced when it's going to be. I don't remember off the top of my head. I didn't write that down in the notes.
My guess is rotation happens the same time Scarlet and Violet releases.
I think it's around that time, yeah. So it'll be coming up before you know it. And we've got you covered here on the Metapod. I've already started thinking about, seeing people talk about post-rotation decks. Japan is in post-rotation. So I've been kind of seeing... Officially in Japan? Yeah, because Ethan Heggie, who is in Japan right now, mentioned that, post-rotation has happened. I think Heggie, I saw a picture, was playing Hisuian Zoroark.
Well, you know what, Jake? Sean, I'll make sure to ask him all about that when I visit Japan.
Oh yeah, are you gonna play, Sean?
I might.
Are you gonna try to play?
I might. I gotta ask Ethan if he'll let me borrow a deck.
What? No, you just. Oh well, yeah.
It's all
you'd
Japanese.
Have to buy Japanese cards.
I would have to
you'd
buy
have to buy Japanese cards.
And also, they'll have like the second. When I go, it'll be the second. It'll already be like the second set or like the mid set of Scarlet and Violet. So like it won't even be like the cards will have even come out in English. It'll be like a set ahead, and I'm like, I don't even know.
Yeah, we're gonna have to talk about the cards on the podcast because you're gonna have to do some research because you're not gonna be able to read.
I'm gonna be like, well, I can't read these, so I just got to know what they do.
And when people explain, you're just gonna have to show them the card. You can't. Anyways, that'll be cool, and we'll get you covered on all the stories, all the news, all the meta here on the Metapod podcast. So long, keep playing. Go to playlimitless.com to join some tournaments and things of that nature. Have a great one.